Are you like one of the many hundreds of people that live in Cambridge, surrounded by beautiful architecture that you know relatively little about? Well, welcome to CUTV's A Very Short Introduction to Architecture. On this whistle-stop tour, we're going to be looking at Gothic architecture in Cambridge, and we're going to be starting with the Round Church. So here we are at the Norman Round Church, which is a 12th century church of the Holy Sepulchre. There are 11 churches like this throughout England. Round buildings like this are called rotundas, and it actually has, as you can see, a militant solidity to its structure. It's more like a fortification than a church itself. It doesn't have many windows either. The builders at the time didn't know much about weight distribution in terms of stone, so they made important buildings like churches out of a whole lot of brick. So approaching the doorway here, we can see a lot of signs that give us a telltale to the Norman way of doing things. They like to use simple patterns in their architecture, and here we can see the 3 columns give a nice little hooded entrance to the church. Now, as we move inside the church, we see that these strong round piers have a Norman weighty reassurance to them, and carving decorations are still sparse. Now, these here are not actually called gargoyles, but rather grotesques, as gargoyles by definition actually have to allow the water to run off the roof and not just drip down the building. This kind of crossed roof is known as groin vaulting.
But I love about it because it has a special feeling. It's very, very special.
Yeah, it's very English as well.
Very English, yeah.
St Benet's is another building like the Norman Round Church. The tower here is typically Norman, with really few amount of windows at the top. The bottom structure was a later addition. So this is Little St Mary's Church, which was a Gothic building from around 1340. The term Gothic refers to the barbaric East Germanic Goth tribe who were famous for attacking the Roman Empire borders. To call something Gothic, therefore, could actually be a term of offence, meaning it didn't follow the rules of classical architecture, which was more civilised and structured. As you can see inside and outside the church, technical improvements over time have allowed for bigger windows, as now the weight of the wall is taken on by these buttresses, one for each bay or section. The Gothic pointed arch is preferred, as Norman semicircular arches caused an outward thrust and were less strong. With Gothic architecture, a good way to tell its date is by the window-to-wall ratio. More window meant it was built later. Bigger windows meant more holy light could enlighten the congregation inside. Now, as Little St Mary's is only a small parish church, the roof would have been originally made of wood to save on materials. But if you were to take a trip up the road to Ely Cathedral, for instance, and the Lady Chapel chamber that was built in the 1330s, you would find examples of Leone vaulting, an ornamental and complicated roofing structure from the Gothic period. At Little St Mary's, however, the walls may not have survived the weight of a stone roof like this. Welcome to King's College Chapel. Now, this is a building you've probably walked past hundreds and hundreds of times, but have you ever really looked at it? On a given day, hundreds and hundreds of tourists will be taking pictures of this as a pinnacle of what Gothic architecture is all about. Now, the windows of the early English period of Gothic quickly gave way to the mid-13th century Tracery Window, which was an open patternwork of masonry or timber most common in Gothic architecture. The windows here at King's Chapel are panel tracery, which use an even, upright divisions made by a horizontal transom, circa 1550. The pinnacles on the roof at the top of the buttresses are clustered with little crockets, which are the little leaf-shaped mouldings. Now, one of the most common misapprehensions about King's Chapel is that the screen built to enclose the college by William Wilkins is actually much older than it is. It was built in the 19th century. The Age of Enlightenment brought about the careful studying of old buildings so that new buildings could follow eclectic designs but still be sensitive to those around them. Still, this is an example of neo-Gothic, just like the chapel at St John's College. The chapel was predominantly built by Richard III and the 3 Henrys, 6th, 7th and 8th. They started building from the east altar end and then moved over to the west. Henry VIII's designs are the most elaborate. He was intent on stamping the heraldic Tudor rose, portcullis, unicorn and dog all over the building. The west side is covered with them. It's amazing, in fact, that the ceiling and window tracery all match, given it took over a century to complete as a whole, running dry the resources of many different quarries in the process.